Okay, we are live now.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today's webinar. We will just start in a couple of minutes.
Example. Huh? Actually, should we begin?
Yeah, sure.
Huh?
Yeah. Okay. So good morning, everyone. Good morning, esteemed participants and our panelists, and welcome to our webinar on families and climate change. I'm Rashi Kohli. I'm the junior psychological counselor at SCEW in the Noida campus, and I'm honored to serve as your host today. So our panelists for this webinar are Ms. Prachi Pranchpe and Ms. Nehal Pimple Khare. Welcome both of you. Prachi ma'am is one of India's first conservation psychologists. She is currently working as a lead psychologist at Wildlife Conservation Trust, where her team takes up various projects in India to help protect and conserve our natural resources. Ma'am stresses on the fact that understanding the psychology behind interaction between humans and nature is of utmost importance, and if dealt with properly, it can help ultimately protect our planet. She also believes that when the countries are graphing different policies, they can study the human needs, and based on that, they can ensure that the policies meet those needs, and this would help in ensuring a long-term impact as well. Her organization is of the belief that solid research done in climate change can work in minimizing the errors. Welcome, ma'am, and we are really glad that you could come up and join this webinar and share your views with us. We are really looking forward to an exciting discussion. Nehal ma'am is a clinical psychologist. She has around 5 years of work experience in the field. She is currently a PhD scholar, and she has been part of our SCEW team for the last 3 years. We are delighted to have both of you, and let's begin and delve into this crucial topic. So, just to kickstart the conversation, as today, 15th May, marks the International Day of Families that is observed every day this year. This day was proclaimed by the UN General Assembly in 1993, and it reflects the importance that the international community attaches with the families. 2024 marks the 30th anniversary of this International Year of Family. And this year, the aim is to raise awareness about how climate change can impact families and the role that families can play in climate action as well. We have been hearing about climate change and how it has a detrimental influence on family health and welfare, and by increasing population, pollution, increase in extreme weather events that we are seeing day in and day out, the disruption to agriculture and food systems, as well as the economic impacts. um, in the light of everything that's going on, Prachi ma'am, I would want you to help our participants understand that why is it that now we are understanding, or now we are considering families as an important part of climate change discussion.
Thank you, Rashi. So basically, we're a humans are social beings, which means that our uh, s- close circles around us affects us, and what we do affects close circles around us. And in a collectivist culture like India, it is very important. Like, you can't escape your family. We don't live in an individualistic culture where once somebody is an adult on paper, their life becomes, independent. In a collectivist context, your independence is also somewhat conditional, where you get bothered by your social surroundings and what and how your actions affect people around you and how people's actions affect you, which means that it's extremely important for us to understand and include families in understanding your day-to-day problems and distress and happiness and everything. And climate change is something that we can't escape. Like, if you talk about what people experienced, say, 15-20 years ago, then people would say that, oh, climate change is in future. And right now it's not the case. Like, we just so I don't know about Noida, but in Maharashtra we just came out of a very, very stressful heat wave, and everybody has been talking about how this has been one of the most stressful heat wave that they have seen. And one of the most important areas that is underexplored is eco-anxiety. And eco-anxiety is eco-anxiety is experiencing anxious people who experience a little bit of anxiety when they think about climate change, when they think about the future. And eco anxiety can have impact on your life in many ways, in like unthinkable ways. Now, it can be from different things, like when a new mother looks at her child and when the food that they get is not as healthy as what she got when she was a baby. And as a mother, this can make her feel extremely stressed. And while in a lot of ways you can work on managing stress, where you can understand that how you can manage stress, but with climate change, the stress is not, an internal thing. The locus of control is external here. And it may make you feel helpless. And coming back to the whole collectivist culture and dependence on families, I do feel that if we understand climate change and its effects, families can actually be a great support system here. And that's where we need to talk about what climate change makes people feel and how people want to look at climate change. If you see young population, they want to take they want to be a part of conservation careers. They want to get into climate change, uh, combating climate change and these sort of careers. So just imagine if there are families who support these sort of career decisions, provided your financial status supports it. Because climate change is like, careers in conservation are upcoming, but we need to understand that, again, going back to Maslow's hierarchy, if your basic needs are fulfilled, then you can come to understanding these sort of issues. So coming back to uh, Maslow's hierarchy, we've studied how it's extremely important for us to reach to a point for self-actualization. Our basic needs are important for them to be fulfilled. With climate change and changing weather, we need to revisit that. Okay, what about my basic needs? Whatever that basic needs people had, and the way weather changes, your basic needs are also going to change, and how that makes you feel is going to change. Now, to give you a very basic example, when I was in college, I didn't have air conditioner at home, and I was completely like fine with it. It wasn't a part of my basic need. A pankha was perfectly fine, a fan was perfectly fine. But when you move towards, like when you're getting closer to, you know, the past couple of years, the climate change has changed in such a way that basic needs have changed. Now I'm talking about extremely physiological needs. And once we understand physiological needs, and if families are able to create a support system here now, for example, if you're इफ योर फूफा जी इज गोइंग टू कमेंट से हमारे जमाने में तो हम फैन से ही चला लेते थे, तुम्हें एसी क्यों लगता है, यू आर बेसिकली डिसमिसिंग व्हाट द चाइल्ड इज गोइंग थ्रू ड्यूरिंग देयर एग्जाम. And these are basic things that if you understand that, okay, it's not the child's fault, it's actually how the surrounding is changing. So if people understand that, okay, this is where we are at, we need to take actions in order to combat climate change, yes, but that step one is addressing and accepting that, oh, we are in it. And it's very important for us to talk about it and address it and not dismiss each other.
Yes, definitely. And based on what you're saying, I also read somewhere that this the climate change. This is what we are facing right now. But when we draw comparison between traditional families and new families, there was a study that was conducted, and it said that while the newer generation is more concerned with climate change and how they can work towards it, their practices are not that sustainable. Based on what you're saying, the increased use of technology, the increased use of air conditioning, while the traditional families did not have enough information about climate change, or there was not like a rise in concern or distress about climate change, but the practices were more sustainable. So while this comparison is also important to draw, but what you're saying is also important, that now that we are witnessing the physiological changes, maybe we also need to understand why these new practices are coming up that might not be such sustainable, and what can be the alternatives. And I think this is where the importance of communication comes in.
Absolutely. Now just imagine, instead of dismissing that you need air conditioner, what if we focus on innovation that helps us manage, say, body temperatures? Or, like we can, instead of dismissing, you can address it. And like India is a very, very smart country where people are focused on innovation. People are trying to look at, change, like just very creative people. Now, as you like, what if we just talk about clothing, like wear clothes that are appropriate to the climate, and don't probably wear jeans in May, and then maybe you don't need the air conditioner as much. Could be a solution, but constant comparison हमारे जमाने में ये नहीं था is not going to help, because the younger population is going to get angry and they are going to come up and say that, you know what, because of you we have climate change, you use the resources more than you required, and which is why we are suffering. Which means that there is no good dialogue that happens. There is just like conflict and disagreements, and who's better and what should have happened. I mean, there is no need
Yeah.
for ifs and buts. We need to look at what can be done.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And coming to your point, when you said that India is a very smart country and people are interested in innovation, I vaguely remember seeing a snippet of Shark Tank India, wherein there was one person, I am not sure of his name, but he used that matka system and created it into walls, and how matka and water together, when you combine it, it can act as a like natural coolant itself, and it can keep the atmosphere cool without utilization of air conditioners. And I think this is where innovation and idea comes in, that, okay, this is what our need is. This is what we accept, that based on current scenarios, this is what we are going through. And these are the new ways we can come up and deal with it.
Absolutely.
Um, Yeah. So now when we are talking about this change in family systems as well, I think we all have noticed how earlier there were joint families, everyone was living under same roof, we were mutually working together, eating and even cooperating with each other in multiple aspects of our life, which helped families also get mentally and physically strong and even economically. And it also helped children, like when people stay in joint families, it helps them know about their values and traditions about the family as well from their grandparents or their elders. But now, since we are seeing this generation of urbanization and westernization, families are now turning to nuclear families, and the basic structure of our family is also changing. Especially, like ma'am mentioned, in the last few decades, important alterations are coming up. We are also hearing news about how the fertility rate is decreasing, how couples are getting either they're getting married at a much later age, or they are bearing children at a much later age. And with all these changes that are taking place, Nehal ma'am, would you be able to help us understand what are some of the key factors that might be driving these changes in the family systems?
Absolutely. So, like you rightly pointed out, there's a shift that we see in social and cultural context. Initially, how it was versus how it is now. So, individuals, they are no longer adhering to the traditional definition of families. They want to come up with their own definition of what it means to be in a family setup. So, it's no longer grandparents, parents, children. We are looking at a much different and individualized definitions of families, right? Plus, there is also a shift of gender roles that we see, which means that the caregiver roles are changing quite a lot now. There is also a shift or change that we see, and the whole question comes up whether or not I want children, especially in the context of this environmental change and crisis that is coming, right? In fact, there's this entire movement which is anti-natalism, which talks about how it is actually beneficial now in this context to not have children, because you will have children, they will ultimately end up being in an environment which is not going to help them in any way, with the environment and climate crisis being one of the major contributors to this decision that a lot of couples make. So there are some anti-natalists that believe that it's actually population growth that causes climate change, which in turn is going to have a harm. So there's this whole conversation that we are having about families in general. So we do see a lot of social and cultural changes that have an influence in the way that we view families. Also, like you rightly pointed out, the advancement of technologies in healthcare, which would mean that it influences how well we want to be connected to certain family members. Although it has its pros and cons, whether or not I want my privacy to get invaded, or whether I actually want to have that connection is a different story. But it is much more easy to maintain relationships now as opposed to how things were a few decades back. At the same time, technology also influences every important domain. In terms of healthcare, we are able to now use technology to bring about new children, to address fertility issues. Healthcare is also a contributor which is going to impact the longevity of someone's life. And that is also going to have an impact on the family dynamics, right? So if there's somebody who's living up to 90, 100 years old, it would probably mean that a lot of other members of the family have to take on this caregiving responsibility. And how that you look that in context of the environmental changes that are happening, it's a tough conversation to have. But all of these changes are coming in, and it's about time that we accept these things, right? Also, we need to look at certain economic factors and how climate change affects economy. It affects the way that we live. So there is something that is known as built environment, right? The environment that we actually construct for ourselves, which would probably include where I get to live, what kind of resources I have at my disposal. And climate has a lot to do with these things. So like Prachi rightly pointed out, right, having an air conditioner, whether I or not I have the financial resources to support that, and how that is going to have an impact on my built environment will determine how I am in my family context. So all of these factors also we need to look at when we are having these discussions about climate and about families, because we are seeing the shift that is happening now in terms of how families function, and how the structure has changed.
Yeah, and definitely. And that also makes us wonder that do these changes that are coming up in families also impact the climate change as well? Prachima, would you have any idea about that?
So Nehal, actually, you took us to through the whole economic factors really like uh in a very perfect way. So to continue with what Nehal just said, what happens is that the root cause of like one of the most prominent outcomes of climate change on humans is that it increases inequality. Climate change will increase inequality, and the minute and climate change is not equal. Like climate change affects the poorest people first and then the elites. So what this does is that this wants you to escape, like it's your survival need to escape climate change. It's your instinct, it's your evolutionary instinct to make sure that you survive and your family survives, which means that you want to climb the economic ladder. And in order for you to climb economic ladder, you have to make sure that you leave some people below you, and then you are at like a higher position or at a higher level. And um it may sound harsh, but climate change is racist, it is unequal, and it will affect the poorest people first, which means that in unknowingly it is also motivating people to become more capitalistic. It is making people become more opportunistic, which is not a very collectively beneficial trait to have. It will increase a lot of anger, conflict amongst communities and societies. You would always believe that, thankfully, I don't live on the ground. Like, I'm in Mumbai currently, so I'll give Mumbai example. So, in extreme monsoon, you will feel, oh, it's good that I'm not on the ground floor. I'm at least on the first floor. And this is what people said 15 years ago. And now people will say that, oh, I'm not on the first floor, I'm on the fifth floor because now pani itna aa raha hai that it will also flood first floor, which means that people want to make more financially sound decisions where people want to move closer to money. And that again takes us to people opting out of like procreation, because it's very expensive to procreate in this time, because there is inflation and it's not affordable to have children in this uncertain era. And when you back it to a pandemic that we had just experienced, the anxiety and the uncertainty has definitely increased, where people are saying that there's no guarantee that another pandemic may not come. And what if my unborn children don't have enough resources left by me? So that anxiousness has also increased. And as Nehal said, that this can actually be very scary for a future generation if we don't have youth. If you don't have youth to work for you, your economy is going to collapse. So because of these small things, the family systems are changing, but there is you can understand why people want to take these decisions, why there is uncertainty. But and again, going back to Hofstede's cultural dimensions, humans don't have a very high long-term orientation. People will think about, their short term in the coming 5 years, 10 years, not 20, 30 years. So the decisions that people are taking based on family are also changing. Like, to give you an example, I met a family friend and they only have one child, and I have a sibling. So I remember they were telling my parents that, you know what, some years ago when we had just one child, we thought that we need only one child, but now we regret it because you need a sibling. So, these sort of things that people take decisions in the moment, but it's only for the short term duration. So we don't know the decisions that people are taking right now based on family and how they'll react to it probably 20, 30 years later.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Definitely. And based on what you're saying, that now that we are considering the impact of climate change on families and how our needs are changing, and based on that, our attitudes are changing, our family structures are changing. I'm also wondering that how is this impacting the environment as well? Because there have been so many reports. Like there is one report by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. They recently released their sixth assessment report, wherein the leading scientists in climate change are mentioning that it's unequivocal that human influence has warmed the atmosphere, ocean, as well as the land. Like there are widespread rapid changes that are happening in our atmosphere, ocean, cryosphere, biosphere. Like with all these changes that are coming up, and like you said, that the distress is also rising, so we can see a dual relationship here, how families are affecting climate change and climate change is affecting families. Prachma, I want to understand, are there any effective ways we can communicate about the science of climate change to families to make them more aware of this topic and to also help them sensitize towards this?
Yeah, so I have a little bit of a different opinion on this particular topic. So, to take you back a little, I was told as a kid that climate change is very it's coming at you. You need to make a difference. You need to work on it, etc., etc. So going back to Susan Clayton's theory, the environmental identity worked on me. I got inspired and I moved into a space where I want to work for conservation. Now I went to a school with a batch of 40 children, okay, and I was the only one who took this career path. I have a bunch of classmates who were told the same thing. Okay, we were told the same thing in the class. We were taken to, the same Tekdi, like a small hill that is in Pune. Everybody has to visit that. So we were taken there. We were told to collect plastic on our way back. I had a habit of whatever fruit that I would eat, I would preserve the sweetest fruit, like seed out of the sweetest fruit, and I would go around throwing the seed on the hill. When I'm taking a train, if I see any empty spot, I would throw it away. In my bag, I had a small dabba of seeds. Okay, so these sort of things that I did. Again, out of the 40 people, only I took conservation as a career path, right? When I meet my friends, they will just like, oh, this is too much, you're carrying your own water bottle and all of that, there's no need, just buy water bottle, ek se kya farak padega, is the attitude even now. So it's time that we revisit and think that does awareness actually result into behavioral change, or does awareness make you averse to the idea? Like, the way there is a 50% probability before you start awareness that it will impact, it will do something in your heart, it will make you want to do something, or it will make you feel that anyway sab khatam ho raha hai, let's just use up all the resources. You don't have data that by telling people will stop doing these things, or by creating awareness this will stop. Like, my favorite example is, you take an average person who smokes and ask them, do you know that smoking is injurious to health? They will say yes, it is. Do they still smoke? They do. So what happens is that awareness is something that has a more of a feel good factor, where you talk about awareness, where you talk about you need to do this, you need to do that, you need to inspire people. It has a feel good factor, which is time being, which has a very short period. It does not have a very long period. So what happens is, and we need to move on from holding children accountable for bringing in the change. What that does is, you are expecting a child, a teenager, to take the responsibility of the family sustainable actions and execute them. Again, this is why we need to understand a collectivist culture. We live in a collectivist culture and children don't have that much autonomy. They don't. We are not going to listen to our child telling them that, oh, this is what we have to do. If the child wants to make a difference, yes. But what happens is, in a lot of these awareness programs, you tell children to go and tell their parents. You tell children to make a difference. You tell children to go and do these things. What happens is, you are taking away the actual responsibility that lies on the big corporations. Like, if I decide that I will not buy a plastic water bottle, but what about the big company, big pharma, and big corporations who are polluting my rivers? So by me not doing one thing is not going to stop climate change, and that awareness is very important. So what I feel is that we need to find a middle ground where an individual action has to be a part of it. Like, as I said, that every child should carry their own water bottle, refill it wherever they can. And now in metropolitan cities across India, you get good filtered water wherever you go. Stations, airports, everywhere you go, you get these things. So these things are available. So they should do these things. They should talk about climate change. But it's also important to hold decision makers accountable to make decisions and policies based on decisions and policies that will combat climate change. Individual action is very important. Don't get me wrong. I'm not against it. All I'm saying is that that's not the only thing. And what happens is with awareness, the problem is that once you have a conversation, you feel that I've made an effort, I've made an impact. But unfortunately, it's not enough. And that is something that we need to talk about. And when it comes to more climate change, like one thing that can happen is that people can promote children into getting into fields that is going to protect our planet and not make it worse. That is one thing that families can for sure do.
Definitely. And I don't think I ever thought of, or anyone ever thought of awareness in this manner, that just by having conversations is not enough. And while individual responsibility is a part, but it is a very small part that we are doing in creating a significant effect in climate change. Having said that, that takes me back to my school days. And I think I might be quite grateful to my school for that, because our director, he was such an enthusiast of conservation. We started something of our own every day. There was no teaching, no information about, okay, why we are conserving, why light energy is important. It's just that for that 1 year, we had our resolve that every day for 20 to 30 minutes, no matter what the weather, we will switch off all electrical appliances. And this we did as an organization which had across all their campuses across India. And I think that is one level up than individual responsibility, that organizations are also taking that responsibility, and then we can move up the ladder by small organizations, bigger organizations, and then finally the big pharma companies and other companies that you are also mentioning. But yes, this is definitely a newer and a more I think logical and reasonable way of looking at awareness and what actually can be done to make change.
Now,
um
I'm
yeah.
sorry, but
Yeah.
to add to that, if you see, there are so many malls and so many shops that have their lights on throughout the night, which is completely avoidable. And I would rather have the decision makers impose a rule saying that you have to switch off lights at night. So if you see, there is like a big store in Mumbai that opened, and it had I left from work a little late that day, and the shop was shut, but the lights were on in the entire building, and they were bright lights. I mean, we can do without it. So imagine if children come together and families come together and they hold these they hold these corporations responsible, that you know what, you can't do this because these things are effectively they are affecting my offspring. And this is the correlation that people are not able to make. People are not able to see the connection that, oh, because there are electricity is being consumed by these certain big shops, big companies, big hotels, and here I am trying to make a change at home, where I'm making my child feel guilty that, you know what, you have to do something for climate change, but we don't see the connection that we have to hold them accountable.
Yes, definitely. I agree. And I think this is my perspective, and feel free to disagree with it. That when we talk of family values and the traditions that we have been holding on to for such a long time, are there ways that we can also utilize these values? Or if you have ever seen in your experience that families utilize their values not just to make changes in their individual responsibilities, and instead of guilting the children, but rather educating them and helping them in their stride to make climate change, as well as take a few steps to involve companies, or maybe advance policy changes? Do you feel that family values can play a role in both these things?
Absolutely. And I'm a big fan of a small Instagram movement that started about actually Monisha Sarabhai knew the sustainability ways, or actually my mom knew the sustainability ways. So if you can make these things trendy, there's nothing like it. Like, I'm a complete believer of understand your audience and talk to them about it. Like, if my mom's plastic bag in her kitchen counter is going to be trending, I am for it. And if that's going to inspire me, I'm for it. Like, now if you remember, as children, if we wanted takeout, if your mom agreed that today I'm not going to cook, we're going to like bring food from outside. Many interactions that I've had with people my age, their moms will always give a steel ka dabba, and she'll say ki, go to the restaurant, tell them to fill whatever that you want takeout and bring it back. So these sort of small things, if you can make them trendy, for sure, why not? Or I'm a fan of Indian culture in a way where we don't waste food. It's so important where people have told you all your life that you can't waste food. And then for that, you can have different sort of, like in some families, they'll tell you that it's sinful, that to waste food, it's not good, or somebody's watching you. You can't do that, or you should be grateful that you have food on your plate. You can't waste it. So these sort of values that Indian culture has held for many years, they have to be promoted. Like, period. Or smallest things like, and again, influence of social media is so bad, where you are talking about self-care and my everything bath and other things. My mom will never let me stay in the shower for longer than 15 minutes. If I'm in the shower, on the 15th minute, she'll start calling me out that I'm wasting water. And this is not exclusive to me. I'm pretty sure a lot of us have had these sort of things. So here we need to have the dialogue between what is trending and what the actual practices we've had. And these small things will definitely make a long-term impact. Now, for example, there is no need to transfer values across the country. South India, for festivals, they do eat on a banana leaf, and then they give the banana leaf to their cattle. Now, there is no need for me to adapt that sitting in Mumbai, Pune, where there are no cattle here. So my banana leaf is not going to be eaten by the cattle. So it's not 100% biodegradable. So I do feel that when we are adapting cultures and traditions, it's very important to take the context into consideration. Now, composting is also, I think, a trending, or my algorithm has made me feel that it's trending. I don't know. So like basic things, like if there is some oil on banana leaf, it will take longer to degrade. Or if there is oil on a paper plate, it will take longer to degrade. But if you give that paper plate to your cattle, they will eat it and it's fine for them. Okay. Now, these underlying concepts have to be discussed, spoken, than just picking it up. If I live in South India, then I have banana trees growing in abundance. But if I live in North India, there are not enough banana trees. So I can't copy that. So it's very important to understand the culture, context, and the geography where you belong to, and then leverage the practices that you have had.
Yeah. And I completely agree that it's not that you just see that, okay, these are the trending ways that people can practice sustainability, and you just start copying them, because that might not be a good idea if that is not coming in from a complete education or awareness perspective.
Yeah.
Now, when we're talking about individual context as well, or geographical context as well, there have been a lot of policies that have also come up. Like, I remember the Paris Agreement has been signed by numerous countries. I think 195 states have signed the Paris Agreement in order to reduce the carbon emissions and to reduce the temperature of the earth altogether. But that is also something that's still left. Like, the recent reports are saying that the agenda they had to reach till 2030, we have a longer way to go. But on the contrary, there are so many countries who are setting the mark. Let's say there's Morocco. They have lifted all the subsidies on gas and diesel. India, it is having a rapid increase in solar power energy. Like we have subsidies for e-vehicles as well. Even then, there are European parliaments who have mentioned that we will give more financial incentives to cities or countries, if they switch their public transport system to a more greener alternative. Now, these are certain things that the policymakers are doing on their end. I'm wondering that when we talk of context, are there ways that these policies can be adapted in families as well, or are there any more subtle or simple sustainable practices that maybe our audience can also learn from and maybe utilize in their daily routine?
Again, I don't want to be cynical about the policies that have, but again, who do you think can afford electrical vehicles? It's a very small percentage of the population. What these policies are made for a very small fraction of the population. What about large population who can't afford electric vehicles? Because electric vehicles are still more expensive than your normal vehicles, even if there is subsidy on it. Okay. And again, going back to electric vehicles, where does our electricity come from? It comes from coal. And coal is not a sustainable way of consuming electricity. So these policies, no, they feel good on surface level. It sounds very good. But just imagine if you belong to a family who can't afford an electric vehicle, and when you're talking about electric vehicle reduces carbon emissions, you should shift to an electric vehicle. It can actually stress you out. And again, it goes back to my point of it creates economic stress. It creates the feeling that you want to climb the ladder, and it basically makes you more capitalistic. And the more capitalistic we become, the further away that we are from combating climate change, because economic inequality will increase climate change. So again, coming back to the point that although the government is making policies, although there are these changes that are happening, we still need to sit back and question, saying that because they are doing it, is that enough? Is there more that we need? And we need to constantly be evaluating, demanding what we need from our side. And if there is a supportive family who's constantly looking out for something that can be better, it will definitely help. Like, and small steps, again, now as a social psychologist, I'm not a fan of holding individuals accountable for bringing in a large difference, because in some way I feel that you're letting the decision makers get away. That's again my opinion. But as I said, that there are small things that can definitely happen where, say, people can educate themselves on what is carbon footprint, and what are the basic things that are very easy to cut down on. Like, for example, now again, I live in Mumbai, so it's very easy for me to take public transport. It's very convenient for me to take public transport and make sure that I reach from point A to point B just using public transport. Even today, we don't have cities that are compatible to using public transport. So again, these small changes are not applicable to everybody. There is no one rule that fits all. It is going to be very context specific. It's going to be very like small things that you will have to adapt to based on what is around you. Now, for example, if you live in Delhi or Mumbai, or Kolkata, if you have a good public transport where you can rely on public, then you can take small measures like, okay, I will start taking public transport once a week and then increase it. It has to be a very self-paced, sustainable change that you are bringing in. Or easiest way is that I will not buy unless it's necessary. These are the small things that you can definitely try and do that will help you make these decisions. And don't support big corporations that are environmentally disastrous is one of the things that we can definitely try doing. Before you purchase anything, you can inculcate a habit in your offspring, in your children, to just Google once before, because now everybody knows how to Google. So one thing that people should do is that, okay, I want to buy something, this is something that I like. You run a Google search saying, they're like, read about what do they feel about environment, what have they done for the environment, and then decide if you want to support that or not. Imagine if large number of people take this like conscious decision and make these differences, then we'll have maybe some hope that these companies don't book as much profit as they have.
Yeah, definitely. So I think the main crux of what you wanted to say was that on an individual level, if you really want to do something, maybe that could be actually educating ourselves, building that consciousness in ourselves. If our family members are interested, having those conversations around them, so that we are not just focusing on, okay, this is a small part that I can do, but by building education, we are building a more knowledgeable population that will eventually combat with these big companies that are not practicing sustainably. And in this entire conversation, we have been talking about how families are getting affected, how climate change is bringing, I think you also use a word called eco angst. And researchers are also noticing that the harm that is being done to our physical health due to climate change. But I think what is still being unrecognized is the harm that the climate crisis is doing to us psychologically as well. There have been so many studies on adolescent health, wherein they said that climate change acts as a risk amplifier by disrupting the conditions that are known to support our mental health, which could be socioeconomic, cultural, environmental conditions, and even our living and working conditions. Like you gave the example of air conditioners as well, that earlier it was not needed. Maybe it was more bearable, the heat was more bearable. Now that is not the case. So, considering the major and harmful impacts that it's having on our mental health as well. Nehal ma'am, I would want to understand from you that how can you know like when we see these common psychological responses to climate change, are there any coping strategies that you would know, or something that would help have the conversation about these psychological responses, and even help families understand some strategies that they can utilize to help themselves reduce their distress, or even that eco anxiety that we are talking about?
Okay, so yes, there's eco anxiety, and we do see a lot of clients coming in now with concerns like these, right? So what is going to happen to my future? And which is very relevant and justified because we are seeing quite a lot of changes that are happening. Along with that, we also see something that is known as ecological grief, which is coming up quite a lot, which is a sense of loss that these individuals experience. Of the environment that they initially had, which is no longer there, a sense of loss of a stable future, or there's also a sense of nostalgia which often accompanies this, wherein individuals find themselves comparing how they had nature and other resources that they could go to, but that will no longer be the case for their children or the future generation that is coming up, right? There's also a sense of despair that we see, wherein they find themselves being extremely helpless. On the one hand, they are putting in a lot of effort to make certain sustainable changes happen, but at the same time, they are also seeing at a larger level their efforts sometimes not obtaining the kind of results that they possibly might expect. So there's a lot of sense of helplessness also that is coming in, which is commonly seen. So now we're looking at how what can be done to address these changes is to look at certain coping mechanisms or resilience building resources that we can look at, right? So one of the things that I like to talk about is something that is known as the circle of control, which often helps people who are experiencing eco-anxiety. So circle of control is visualized in 3 concentric circles, with the one that is on the outside is contains of all the things that are relevant to me, but are absolutely beyond my control, right? So these things possibly would include the rate of, let's say, rising sea levels, or the rate at which the climate is deteriorating is something that is going to affect me, but is not in my control, so to say. The second circle that we see is our circle of influence, which includes all the events or the things that you can influence, but may not be directly in your control. So these would possibly be the policy level changes that the government makes. You can certainly collectively influence these things, but they might not be in your direct control, so to say, but you can certainly have an impact on that larger level things. And inside of this circle is all the things that are in your direct control. So whether or not the efforts I make to reduce my carbon footprint, the efforts I make towards sustainability are in my direct control, I'll be able to pick and choose what to do, what not to do, right? So the whole idea is to conceptualize this into these three categories and try to increase your circle of influence as much as you can, and actually actively do the things that are inside of your circle of control, right? So what it does is that with anxiety, we tend to dwell on the what if scenarios. And we also see a sense of helplessness that is accompanied with it. What this allows us to do is it allows us to get back some sense of control. So there is some positive action that is backed by all the discussions that we possibly will be having. It is also important to connect with family and like-minded people to have these discussions, engage in conversations, and there is significant research that talks about how building a sense of community, a sense of purpose, might help overcome these challenges. Also, possibly try and share hope with other people, wherein you're seeing it's news right now would be flooded with all of the things that are possibly going wrong with our environment, right? But also, whenever you hear or see certain encouraging news or a story, possibly share that with people around you who are passionate about this cause. So fostering a sense of hope can sort of channelize this eco-anxiety into action. So for instance, there was a time where we were worried about the depletion of the ozone layer, right? In the 1980s, there was also an agreement signed to eliminate these ozone depleting chemicals, the chlorofluorocarbons. And as a community, we tried to sort of improve and reduce emissions from refrigerators or other things that emitted this. And we did see a little bit of an improvement there, which was a result of collective action ultimately. And families at the core had a lot to do with this overall impact that we saw. So it also helps to share such instances, which is a hope building initiative. So on the one hand, there is action, which is backed by realistic hope, which is not something too outrageous that we're talking about, that we will change the face of this planet in the next 10, 20 years, but it is based in reality and rationality. So these are a few things that come to my mind when we're talking about building these such resources in terms of resilience, coping mechanism to help overcome these challenges that we're seeing.
Yeah, and all these strategies that you have been mentioning are the ones that we can apply on a familial or a community level as well. Because these days, climate change is being like, since families is being considered as an important conversational part of climate change. It is like recently being considered as an intergenerational issue as well. And like you said, the most common responses to eco angst or the common like the climate change that's happening, anger, guilt, shame, the fear, and feeling that we are helpless. I think all of the strategies that you have been talking about would eventually help us overcome all these distresses and still take some actions that can not only bring in hope but also come up with sustainable changes as well. Having said that, I think this is a good point wherein we can end our session for today. I really am grateful for this conversation, and I got a part to be here with you all. I think there were so many insightful conversations that we had that even, at least from my perspective, I never got a chance to think of it in that way. So thank you both, Prachi ma'am and Nehal ma'am. And now the floor is open for the participants. If they have any questions, if they want to put it on chat box, please feel free to ask any questions that you would want to. Okay, I think we don't have any questions, just you do. Okay. Meanwhile, I would like to thank all the participants who find this session quite insightful, and I'm glad that you guys were able to take back something from it. Okay, Dr. Rahul is asking that the recent shift in looking for a planet like Earth in the universe where humans can inhabit it, how much feasible do you think it is, and how does this also impact the climate change movement?
That's very interesting. So actually, so to say, if we understand humans from the very from the very evolutionary standpoint, I do feel that humans are evolved to consume. So even if we look for another planet and want to, um, you know, get another chance, I don't think humans will be able to manage it in a very productive way. I do feel that humans will also consume all the resources on that planet and will cause climate change there too, because we've evolved that way. Like that's the basic crux of how we've evolved. So I think it's a bit difficult, but how does that affect people is that people may feel hopeful that if there is an alternative, we can continue to live our life and not make a difference in our behavior because we are going to leave this planet and go to another one. So I think it will affect negatively.
Yes, yes. So this also dampens the movement. What people are thinking, like they start forcing that maybe some next planet will be identified where we can, our future generations can relocate. So let it go, like it is already been irreversible damage now or so. And the amount of money what been spent that could have been used for the climate change movement. What as a uh, human being, I don't know about the other planets and all. I'm not the expert in astrophysics and all, but still I feel that this is just giving a false hope or a very delayed hope that will only damage the current situations. I thought to hear from you. Thank you, Dr. Prachi and Nehal, for joining this. It just reminds me one of the things that people say like save nature and they consider themselves apart from nature, like they're not part of the nature. Is really a painful thing that what people say like save nature or save trees and all. So thank you for this wonderful webinar, and I hope this helps people to realize this important aspect about families and mental health and what can be done at the family levels for saving climate or working on the climate change. Thank you. Yes, Rashi.
Yeah, and I think you put both you and Prachimam put it quite rightly. Like as a psychologist, we can see that the motivation behind looking for a different planet, it's just we trying to escape from our current difficult scenario, and it is giving all of us quite a false hope. And like we are working from our helpless position that oh we cannot do something, so let's look for something wherein we can have a fresh start. And I think that would again like ma'am said that we might not be able to utilize the resources there as well. So I think educating ourselves and actually seeing if we are consciously interested in saving our planet, how can we feel one and united with our planet, how what all we can do, even if the smallest or the largest, whatever we feel comfortable we can do. And coming to that, I think I would like to extend a heartfelt thanks to all the participants who have joined us today and have also engaged with us throughout this important conversation. I'm truly humbled by the understanding and how much commitment we are showing towards climate change, and how we are also taking part of families as well. I would also like to again express my gratitude for our panelists as well for sharing their expertise and their insights. And As we just conclude this webinar, and as ma'am has also mentioned, I would just encourage everyone to continue taking our climate action journey to the best of our abilities, keep on educating ourselves, and explore what could be the different ways we can, do our part in saving our planet. And together, I genuinely believe that we can make a difference in building a more resilient and sustainable future. Thank you, everyone, once again for your participation and dedication, and have a lovely day. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Thank you.